This is an interesting episode. When I first watched it, I thought it would be one of those that I gloss over. The DS9 episode Rules of Engagement didn't appear to add a lot to the Dominion War mythos. However, the more I thought about it and analyzed the actual episode itself, the more I see the implications. This is before Starfleet is at war with the Klingons and prior to open hostilities with the Dominion. Starfleet is in an odd situation, to say the least. They know that the war is unjust and the Cardassians are suffering. They don't want to start a war with the Klingons, but can't just leave the Cardassians to their fate. So Starfleet agrees to assist in humanitarian aid and only engages in the war when the needs of Cardassians' people are at stake. Looking at the episode proper, I was initially a bit skeptical that the Klingons would allow Starfleet to do this and wouldn't just use it as a reason to go to war with the Federation. Starfleet is not only being passive about the possible corruption of Cardassia by the Dominion at this point, but is now aiding the Klingons' enemy to a degree. However, assuming that the Klingons aren't complete idiots and that the Martok changeling isn't able to just do anything he wants, it does make some semblance of sense that the Klingons would tolerate this for right now, possibly to prepare for a war with the Federation, not just attacking to attack. So the situation isn't completely illogical. Now, for a minute, let's look at the overall plans of the Klingon Empire when it comes to this court case. The thought is that by exposing a Starfleet officer and proving that he became enraged and killed civilians without thinking and proving this to the Alpha Quadrant, that the Federation would then back off and let the Klingons continue their war unabated without issue. Starfleet would no longer help with humanitarian aid after this. Let's, for the moment, grant everything about the Starfleet officer, which is far from the truth, but let's just say that a Starfleet officer in the middle of battle slaughtered civilians. No, you know what? No. Let's remove that aspect. Let's make it as horrible as possible. A Starfleet officer knowingly killed innocent civilians because he could. It wasn't in the midst of combat, and it wasn't justifiable in any way. So just a horrific individual. Do you really think the Cardassian mother who is watching her son starve on the streets of Cardassia gives one good damn what that one officer did? Do the governments of the Alpha Quadrant hate Starfleet so much that they would let one indiscretion change their opinion completely about the Federation? Are the admirals at Starfleet Command and politicians within the Federation so weak that they won't save people despite having one officer go off the rails? That they would allow innocent civilians die because they are embarrassed at one incident? I mean, wow. This takes Federation pacifism to a whole new level. Either the Klingon Empire gravely miscalculates the Federation, or the blood of Starfleet is water by now. And remember, Sisko never counters the Klingon advocate when he claims all of this in the episode. We're left to think that this is actually what would happen. It's just ridiculous. But let's get into the case itself. As I discussed in the video where we put Gaius Baltar on trial, introductions in a criminal case are very interesting to watch but don't hold any weight, nor are they considered evidence. They simply paint a picture, a story. In this case, the advocate presents Worf as a Klingon warrior in the heat of combat going on to slaughter anything in his way. That Worf is quote-unquote grossly negligent in his command and that it resulted in the deaths of civilians. The Klingon Empire is asking that Worf be returned to stand judgment. This is actually not a horrible opening on the side of the prosecution. Let me discuss something before we get into the defense's opening. I get that it was done for the story, but the fact that Sisko is defending Worf makes little sense. Worf should have a JAG officer representing him, which we know exists in the universe. If they wanted Sisko to be a part of the proceedings, he could have demanded to be on the legal team. I can see him doing that, but another officer who is there, who is an actual lawyer, would be a lot more logical to have, but we never see that. The defense is pretty simple. The Defiant was engaged with two different enemy vessels that were utilizing Cloak and trying to destroy the Defiant itself and the humanitarian aid vessels that the Defiant was protecting. A Klingon transport vessel wanders into the combat zone, decloaks right in front of the Defiant, and is destroyed. An unfortunate accident. And again, I don't think this was a bad introduction. Both sides are doing well so far. As the court case continues, the Klingon advocate, who claims to want to beat Starfleet on their own battleground in the courts, states that he accepts all of the evidence presented. He accepts all of the statements of the bridge crew, keyword here all. He accepts the sensor logs and the events as presented. Sisko, of course, asks for a dismissal of the case since there isn't anything in dispute, and the advocate replies that what Worf was feeling is what is at the heart of the matter. That Worf wanted to kill. Here's the problem with the reply from the advocate. That is completely counter to the facts that are presented in the case. The account of the bridge crew, the sensor logs, and the events as they were described claim that it was all an accident. So you can't say that you accept the facts as presented and then go on to say these facts are an error. For someone who wants to fight on the battlefield of the Federation, you are extremely bad at this. But putting that idiocy aside, what the Klingon is actually asking for, as far as I can tell, is to prove the mens rea of Worf. What was his mental state? While I do have an associate's in criminal justice, I am no lawyer, but I will address at some point what Worf was feeling to see if he actually had a guilty mind. We'll be doing that a bit later, though. Moving on, the first witness to be called is Jadzia Dax, and she is called by the advocate. An interesting note here. The advocate is the one to call her to the stand, as I've stated, and yet is treating her like a hostile witness. You aren't allowed to ask your own witnesses leading questions. That's only allowed during the cross-examination or with a witness considered hostile to the lawyer asking the question. As he called her, and has no reason to consider her hostile at this point, he should not be allowed to ask leading questions such as, "Wouldn't you say the Klingons are a violent warrior race?" He could, however, ask, "How would you describe the Klingons?" or something of that nature. Again, this is probably why we need a JAG officer defending Worf instead of a man who destroys planets' entire ecosystems to take down one terrorist, but sorry, I need to stop doing that. Let me address the leading question as well. So the Klingon asks if Jadzia believes his race is a violent warrior race. She states that's an aspect of it. Honestly, I personally would disagree to that in recent times. Klingons have been violent warriors in the past, true, but in Star Trek Undiscovered Country, we saw them embrace honor and become a bit more honorable. It's not about the combat or the battle, but how that combat or battle brings honor to everything. In fact, you don't have to be a warrior to bring honor in Undiscovered Country. You could be a Klingon cook or an engineer. As long as what you did pushes the Klingon Empire forward and brings honor to your family, you are being what a Klingon should be. Now, certainly we could argue that the Klingons may be falling from grace, the old ways and whatnot, but it would be worth countering this by focusing on the honor aspect, which of course the defense, Sisko, never does. How in the hell is a critic able to better defend Worf? I'm just asking. The advocate continues and presses Jadzia, asking if she believes Klingons are a threat due to their predatory nature and Klingon bloodlust. Jadzia admits that she has seen this bloodlust in Worf's nature, but has also observed him hold back when necessary. She points out that when she fights him, she can see the quote-unquote bloodlust and how he stops and pulls back before he kills her. The advocate, once again showing he is capable of fighting on the battlefield of the court systems, tries to submit into evidence private records from Worf obtained without a search warrant. Sisko objects, which is weird. He rarely does the right thing, but he points out that this is a breach of Worf's privacy. The Klingon advocate taunts Worf and asks if he has anything to hide. Worf takes the bait and allows the evidence to be submitted. Again, this is incredibly stupid. Just because you don't allow someone to utilize information on you that was obtained illegally doesn't mean you have anything to hide. It means that you want your rights to stay intact and not begin the slippery slope that will ultimately occur if you allow this to happen. Despite what the advocate thinks, the justice system they are employing ensures innocent people stay free. Giving up your rights is not something you should ever allow unless you are forced to do it. That doesn't make you guilty. That doesn't mean that people can't find the truth. It means that the court system is fair. But let the evidence be submitted, Worf does. The Klingon advocate shows a holographic program where Worf plays a conqueror that defeats a city and then burns it to the ground, killing every man, woman, and child. The advocate points out that this shows that Worf is a murderer and does not believe in the ideals of the Federation, and that the program was played the day before the convoy went out. Yet again, the amazing Sisko doesn't object, because doing so would give Worf a fighting chance. And even if we assume that this isn't a point where he should object, he should at least point out the flaws in this argument. First, Worf is playing a video game that involves him killing people. Fantastic! Welcome to the 21st century, Chief. We do that all the time and don't go on mass murdering sprees, regardless of what the media would tell you. But let's set that aside. Again, let's give as much leeway as we can. Let's say that Worf does this because of his bloodlust, that it proves that he is a violent Klingon warrior. Fine. Then the argument is easy to counter. Worf gets out all of his aggression in this video game so that he doesn't use it on the battlefield. We know that Vulcans going through Ponfar will utilize holographic simulations which help them not sexually assault other Starfleet members. The redirect here, pointing that out, is simple and logical. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a stupid argument. It's a video game we're discussing, but if you want to try it, then that is a way of him getting out his aggression so he doesn't use it. I mean, but what do I know? I'm just a dude that calls himself the lore master, so. The next witness is Captain Benjamin Sisko. The advocate is calling the legal defense as a witness, which is why you should not have Sisko as the legal defense, but whatever. The advocate asks about the mission Sisko gave to Worf. The advocate clarifies that Sisko was very clear in his orders that it was a relief mission and not a combat one. Sisko confirms that those were the orders to ensure the medical aid got to the planet. The advocate has no further questions, and when Sisko is asked if he would like to add anything to the record, he declines at this time. The next one we see is Quark. Quark explains how Worf was looking forward to the convoy mission. At the bar, Worf would come in for a drink, and Quark asked him what would happen if the Klingons came after the convoy, and Worf states, "I hope they do." I understand that the advocate is trying to build a case, but all of this is flimsy as hell. So Commander Worf plays a video game and then hopes that the Klingons attack the convoy. Thereby, that means he is a bloodlusted Klingon that is going to kill every civilian he can find. I mean, the logic being used here is infallible. As everyone knows, SF Debris had been making Star Trek episode breakdowns for years before I started this channel. So after watching him, I began making my own videos, which are somewhat popular, and it ultimately results in my ex leaving me because she discovers I had a love triangle with Ketwalski and Lore Runner. I mean, it just all makes sense. I get it. The advocate is building a case, but all of this is highly circumstantial, and even with the evidence, wouldn't meet the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. Again, we'll talk about that in a bit. So there is a lot more material to go through, and I think it's worthy to split this into a two-parter. Let me know your thoughts as of right now. What do you think about the episode rules of engagement? Do you think the evidence is compelling so far? Let me know in the comments below.